Hello and welcome to Sew Local's Mending and Alterations video course. I'm Marja and this is Selacia. You can use this video course in a couple of different ways. You can work through the videos one at a time as a course and practice the techniques as you go, or you can use the videos as a reference and just look them up whenever you need to learn that skill. So I'm going to be showing you how to replace coat zippers, patch holes, how to do different kinds of hems.
And I'm going to be showing you how to darn and some of the visible mending work I've done, and share some different resources that I've used to learn the stuff that I've learned.
Let's take a look at what's in the kit.
This is a darning egg.
And here we have some rinse away basting tape.
Here is our cute little 4-inch embroidery hoop
that we'll be using for flat darns. These are Sashiko needles.
And here is some Sashiko floss, similar but different to regular embroidery floss.
This is a sewing gauge.
This is some wash away glue for mending.
A pack of mixed sewing machine needles for any type of fabric that you're going to come across.
Pocket power snips so that you don't stab yourself with your scissors when you're sitting down.
And they're powerful. This is Heat and Bond Light, which we're going to use for making your own fabric patches.
And a scary but actually very useful surgical seam ripper. And our lovely instructions.
Here's a list of all the videos, and then there are written out instructions for both the classic hem and the Euro hem. So Selacia, can you explain to us what exactly visible mending is?
So visible mending is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically any mend that is visible. You're not trying to hide it, and you're not trying to pretend that your garment is brand new. You're embracing and showing off the way that you fixed it.
Right, so it's almost like you're celebrating it and you're saying it's gorgeous and it's beautiful and I want to show it off, and mending is important, and that's like a value.
It also, it reflects your values, and
so it's a way of expressing yourself as well.
It's also a little bit easier than traditional mending as well, just because, especially with darning and things like that, when you're trying to hide your floss colors and stuff like that in your fabric.
Right, because you don't have to worry so much about it being absolutely perfect and making it look invisible. Right.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay, so what about Sashiko? Because it's a Japanese word that we hear sometimes when people are talking about visible mending, but what does that mean? What is it?
So I like to think of Sashiko as a stitch.
Okay.
Sort of like if you were about to say, I'm going to fix this hole with a ladder stitch.
Okay, so Sashiko
it's the same kind
is
of
a
thing.
type of stitch.
It's a type of stitch, and it translates to little stabs in Japanese. And it refers to the different running stitches that are used throughout. Running stitches are used in a lot of different needlework, but these ones with these types of needles are specific to boro work. And boro is another word that comes up when people hear Sashiko, and you can kind of think of boro as the product of Sashiko stitches.
So Sashiko is the stitch itself, and boro is what you get from it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
This is my limited understanding of the process, because I'm not Japanese and I haven't been in that culture and learned about it that way. I don't feel comfortable teaching these techniques because I don't know that I understand them properly myself.
Right. And because they're not ours to teach.
They're not mine to teach. We will share some links of wonderful creators that I've followed and learned from, but I think it's best if you learn about this amazing art from the people who practice it themselves. And I definitely feel very inspired by a lot of this work, and so we do have a pair of jeans that I mended when I was learning about this.
Are you wearing them right now?
I am wearing them right now.
Stand on the table, let's get a shot of this. Here. So Sashiko is a whole bunch of running stitches going up and down. There's often a patch behind.
It's reinforcing
the fabrics, and you can see here on the side too. She did it all along there, and they did it all in the front too. It's so pretty. I love it. I love your jeans.
Thank you. I love them too. So, Maria, how do you decide if you want to do a visible or hidden repair?
So yeah, that's the first thing you have to figure out when you're gonna mend. I think it depends a lot on your personal taste and how you want that garment to look. But there are some things that I'll always think about, like how worn is the garment. If it's really worn out, it's probably going to be hard to make it look invisible. So you might want to do something that is more visible.
Exactly.
And it's a time for you to be creative and have some fun with it. Another thing to think about is if it's a casual or formal garment, because if it's more formal and you want to keep that formal look, it's better to do an invisible mend, or as invisible as you can make it, because visible mending does often make it look a little bit more casual.
Although, location.
That is very, very true.
Because there are some mends that you can do on more formal wear that can make them look like it was originally
like adding
intended.
embroidery, like if you were to mend a hole up here or something,
Yeah.
or on my blouse having
It can just
like
look
some
like
embroidery up here would be fine. But if you're trying to fix some worn out thighs, you're probably not going to want to do visible mend there.
Although, you always can.
You always can. Actually, that could be fun too. Yeah, so those are kind of the main things that you have to keep in mind. But visible mending can be done at almost any stage of the garment's life because it's very creative and there are so many options. Almost everything you do can be done as a visible mend. So all of the techniques that we're going to be doing in the videos, you can do them visible just by even using a contrasting stitch thread rather than doing a thread that hides. Pick a color that is going to pop.
Even just hemming your jeans.
Yeah. So you can do different examples of visible mending would be visible patches with a contrasting fabric rather than a fabric that blends. Pick one that pops.
Do some embroidery by hand or with your machine. I mean, most machines have some sort of decorative stitch, and you can even do that when you're hemming.
Yeah, exactly. And darning is another good thing that you can do either
visible
or not visible, depending on what colors you pick and where you do it.
Darning is one of the easiest ones to do invisible, actually. Just
and
because
with darning,
you have so many options.
You can
for
do
colors.
it on both. Like a lot of people think of socks when they're darning, but you can actually do it on a flat piece of fabric.
Exactly.
And so
I've even done it on furniture.
Yeah, actually, I will show you some a couch cushion that she just darned. Other things that you can do.
Or wait.
So, go ahead.
Sorry. With darning, the other thing you can do is you can mimic any patterns that are there. Because it's a weave, when you change your thread colors, you can mimic the pattern that's already there.
So you can actually make it quite invisible.
Yeah, rather than trying to find like a perfect match for a fabric, you can mimic the pattern that's already there. I've seen some people do it where they do the same pattern that's like there on a gingham, but they do contrasting colors. Like they'll flip the colors or that kind of thing.
Nice. Other things you can do are felt applique, and then contrast stitching, like I said before, and then also sashiko is a really good, buttons to cover a stain or a little hole or something like that. Doing hand embroidery is a really fun way to do it. DMC website, you've shown me some really, really cool patterns. If you go to the DMC website, they have free patterns as well as patterns that are available for purchase. And some of them, if you search for fix or mend, they actually have a bunch that are made specifically for.
I have their newsletter, and I get their different free embroidery and knitting and crochet patterns all the time in my email. And they have actually the thread list on there as well. And we carry a ton of the different DMC flosses.
Right,
so
yeah, we have a big
you can always,
selection.
if you like the colors they use, you can.
Okay, let's look at some of our favorite visible mends.
So this is a couch cushion that I darned, and I did 3 darns on here with just regular embroidery floss here, and a smaller one up here, and I did a 3rd one here. And usually when mending something flat like this, I like to use a curved needle, and we carry them in the store. And
you did this darn, like you did not take the cover off or anything. You just did it right on there, so you didn't you weren't able to put an embroidery hoop or anything
No.
on it. You just did it flat like that, and it worked out really well with the curved needle.
And so I just did it like that. Because of the curve of it, it allows you to get into some of those spots that are a little bit more tricky. And I did test one with a flat regular needle, a regular Sashiko needle, which is this one in the corner, just because I know you guys aren't getting the curved needles in your kits, and I just wanted to show that it is definitely possible to still mend 3D things without them.
If you found a perfect match for this, you could have made it
Oh yeah.
hidden too, but it's so cute. I love it. Okay, let's look at my jeans. These are my favorite jeans I've ever owned, and I did so many things on these. They started out by, I wore through the knees, just wearing them normally. And so I started with just a couple patches in the knees, did a little bit of embroidery around them. And then as I kept wearing them, actually there's another one, I have to do this again. So one thing to keep in mind is when you're trying to do this with narrow legs, you have to open up the side seam so that you can get right in there. It makes it a lot easier. And then I did this hand embroidery on here, which I absolutely loved. It was a really fun project. And then I just also did lots of contrast stitching back and forth here just to reinforce it in areas where it was weak, but also just to have fun with it. And
It's fun pops of color.
I just kept on changing my thread color and kept going.
And the stuff you did with the machine too is kind of similar to the idea with Sashiko, where you're reinforcing it with stitching and designs, just because you're adding that extra fiber to the garment.
Yeah.
This dress has quite a few mends in it, and I know I need to do a few more. So it's a linen dress, and there's a loose weave along the back, and that started to unravel a little bit. So this is a mix of running stitches and darns. So if you see the bottom here are a bunch of running stitches, and then there's darns inside, more there. There's some running stitches here.
And you did it on this other shoulder too, so
Yeah.
it does look even now because you have it all the way across the back, and it just looks almost like embroidery. It's very pretty.
And
It's a little bit there.
I use the same variegated floss throughout. This one is a darn along the cuff.
And then is there another little part down at the bottom?
There isn't any on the bottom yet, but I did realize I need to do some. And so I also do a lot of preventative running stitches throughout my garments. So you can see this, the weave was starting to get loose and there were little nicks in it. So I just popped a little bit of floss in there and kind of tacked any of the loose pieces down so that it doesn't get worse. And my sweater, this was a long time coming. So this is an example of what can happen when you're doing less preventative mending and more restructuring entirely. So I mended this with a blend of Sashiko floss and sock weight yarn that we had left over. Stole it from Marja. That's the blue in here. And you can see I did lots of darns and running stitches and these little star designs. You kind of do them just by going through the same spot. They're decorative,
kind of like
but
a
they're
lazy daisy stitch.
yeah, but it's the lazy daisy. And then this is the biggest darn on here, and you can see that's more of the variegated sock yarn with the Sashiko floss, which makes it quite strong and also warm.
Oh, I like this one. That's
So
pretty.
this one is actually not a traditional darn when you look at it. I did a blanket stitch around the circular hole, and then I did another blanket stitch and another blanket stitch, and it's sort of like just doing a blanket stitch in the round. You just keep going and going and going until the middle. And then I went over it with the purple Sashiko floss in the middle just to hold the center together so there was no hole. And that's a nice way to build up a section more quickly, especially if you have like an organic shaped hole. And the cups had a little bit of fraying and loose thread, so I just did more of those little star flower stitches on it to reinforce. I think I also had a coffee stain here. And that is my mend.
This is such a cute little patch.
Yeah, so there's two pieces of felt there, and I just went around the edges. Before I did this patch, I did use a circular needle to stitch up the main hole in here because it was quite large. It's actually about the size of the patch almost. And then I went in with the felt after. I'm still finishing it, but...
This is an example of a flat darn that Selacia chose similar colors so that it almost is mimicking the pattern of the plaid shirt.
Yeah, and this one I did with the embroidery hoop, just because it's right by the shoulder on my arm, so it's completely flat and you don't need to use the egg to curve it at all. And then I also did the buttons will sometimes come open because they're spaced a little bit too far apart. So these are actually snaps, these two. And I put the snaps in, and then when I was putting this one on, I put a button on top, so they're just decorative covers so you don't just see the snaps. I also just like green a lot, so, and hearts. If there's a heart on it, I'm gonna put it on my clothes.